Hey, welcome to Witchy Wednesday. It's Lara here with your weekly astrology forecast. And this one's for the week of January 15th to 20th, 2020, not 2019 anymore. First off, if I'm looking a little tired and I'm sounding a little tired, it's because I am. I am. It's Wednesday. It doesn't feel like Wednesday. It feels like Monday morning right now. But we are coming off the astrology, right? Of the powerful astrology of last week, particularly the weekend, where if you watched last week's two-part video, I talked about, we may have some surprises in store and that kind of thing. And sure enough, that's what happened over here. On Friday afternoon, my brother and sister-in-law from Texas showed up as a surprise, literally like right here. I'm in my crawl space digging through a bin looking for something, and I hear, "You need some help with that?" And there they were. So they came up to surprise all of us. Well, my one sister knew it was happening, but it was my brother-in-law's surprise 40th this past weekend. So they came up for that and for an impromptu kind of family visit and gathering. So it's been a hectic few days. They just left yesterday. It was fun, but it was completely, sort of out of routine, which is pretty much, no surprise when we look at the astrology. And so I wonder if any of you might be willing to share if there were any shakeups where you are. I know that not everybody experienced this in a super positive way. We had some obviously intense things going on a global scale, sort of a mixed bag, really. Uranus stationing direct, that's still reverberating. In the last week, we've had 4 volcanic eruptions that I've heard of, very Uranus and Taurus. And, of course, the political events going on all over. And then even personally, I know some people that had, that dealt with some less welcome kind of surprises and shakeups and challenges and that kind of thing. So, if that was you, then that sucks and I'm sorry. Just know that we are, as I said to you last week, January is pretty intense. And then things should start to ease off a little for a while. And that's welcome news. So I'm going to talk about sort of all of that here as we move forward. We may be still at the early part of this week, including today, Wednesday, we may still be feeling, a bit rattled, a bit off-kilter. And it may be a bit of a challenge getting back to routine, right? But as I said, gradually we will get our bearings and begin to kind of hit our stride a little more easily. But here's the thing. We'll likely notice that rather than getting back to what we thought was normal, in all likelihood, this is the start of the new normal for us, whatever that may end up being, right? All of us, we're entering a sort of new normal phase, if you will. And the very beginnings of that, right, of any kind of sort of shift can feel quite disorienting. They can feel confusing and uncertain. And so we may be feeling that, in January here. But thankfully, we have a couple things happening this week that are going to bring us a bit of a healing balm to soothe us a little and support us. And those are Jupiter becoming visible in the sky and Venus moving into Pisces. So I'll talk about those things happening and then some other things happening because we do have some other planetary shifts this week. Mercury and the Sun are both moving into Aquarius out of Capricorn. So that's going to feel like a definite shift as well. So we're going to get into all that. And then later in the video, I will go through the signs and I'll touch specifically on Venus moving into Pisces and Mercury and the sun moving into Aquarius. So let's circle back and start with the moon. I like to start with the moon. You know, the moon is my touchstone, and it is what impacts us more regularly here. It's really reflective of our daily rhythms, right? And so I like to start there. So the moon just entered Libra as I started recording this, and that can start to bring things into a little bit more balance for us. We can feel a little bit more emotionally kind of, on an even keel as the moon moves through Libra. And then she moves into Scorpio on Friday and is in, that intense Scorpio energy throughout the weekend, and then moves into Sagittarius on Monday. And on Friday, the 17th, right, she'll be in her last quarter square phase in Libra. So we've had the full moon, and now the energy begins to wane, right? And so we are kind of integrating what's gone on, what transpired over the course of the full moon, and reflecting on that. And the energy begins to move more inward, right? It's not so much at this yang phase. It begins to move more internal, and we are more sort of reflective and receptive kind of thing at this stage. But when there is a square, right, both the waxing and the waning, the first quarter and the last quarter square of the moon tends to be a time when there may be a bit of a crisis point where it's a bit of an adjustment. And with the last quarter square, it can be this like what worked and what didn't work for me in terms of what I tried to initiate at the time of the new moon, right? Did it come to fruition at the full moon in the way that I'd hoped, or do adjustments need to be made now? And reflecting on that, right? And so that's where we're at moving into the weekend. And then the energy will wane further. We'll move into, the dark moon phase and eventually have the new moon in Aquarius, which I'll talk about in next week's video. But if you're interested in knowing more about the moon and how you can work with her energies, then please head over to my website, download my free guide to working with the moon, and that will help get you started with that. The link is below where you can do that. Okay, so let's go back to kind of where I started in terms of a couple of events that are happening this week that can bring us some soul soothing. It's been a bit of as I said, like a bit of a disruptive start to January, right? On a number of levels. So we have Jupiter, who moved into Capricorn not that long ago, right? Out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn, becoming visible in the sky. So in late November, around 29th, 30th, I can't remember exactly, but Jupiter got so close to the sun that we can no longer see it in the sky. And so not visible to the naked eye, to us here on Earth, right? And it has been invisible since then. And gradually over the mid to late January, depending on where you live in the world, Jupiter will become more and more visible in the sky. The sun is moving away from Jupiter. Jupiter's getting some distance from the rays of the sun, and so we'll begin to be able to see Jupiter, and it will look brighter and brighter in the sky, moving through January and into February. So throughout February and into the spring. So that has this impact of, it's kind of like a retrograde in the sense that when Jupiter becomes invisible, the obvious effects, the impact goes away too, right? It doesn't really go away. It's more internalizes. We don't tend to see Jupiter's impact, which is, Jupiter brings us growth and expansion and abundance and optimism and luck and wisdom and all of these things. And we don't tend to see that when Jupiter is invisible so obviously in our lives and in the world. So when Jupiter now is becoming visible, we will gradually feel those positive vibes, right? Those positive Jupiterian vibes returning. Now, keeping in mind that Jupiter can be a bit of a gas bag in the sense that it can expand. It expands whatever it comes in contact with. And so, it can be mindful of where you put your focus. Put your focus on what you want to expand, right? What are you grateful for? What do you want to be grateful for? Those kinds of things. That's how you want to work with this energy. And I won't go through Jupiter through each sign because Jupiter's in Capricorn. We've been talking a lot about Capricorn. And likely by now, that's where the conjunction just took place. That's where all the energy is still crowded as I'm recording this video in Capricorn. And so likely where Capricorn is in your chart if you've been watching these videos for a while. And so Jupiter, the house that Jupiter is moving through is the same house that Saturn and Pluto just conjuncted in, right? And I spoke about this before, that Jupiter will now bring us some gradual relief, I think, from the heaviness that we've been feeling in that area of our chart. It may begin to feel a bit more hopeful and optimistic overall. So the next thing is that Venus is moving into Pisces Venus has moved into Pisces at the time of this recording. It happened earlier in the week, Monday or Tuesday, depending on where you live. And so we're just at the beginning of that transit. And Venus will be in Pisces until early February. I didn't write down when, but early February. So Venus really likes to be in Pisces, right? That gentle, sort of creative and more dreamy energy of Pisces. Venus is very comfortable there. So this is good news. And as I said, it can feel quite soothing after the excitement, right, of last week. It also, Venus makes some nice aspect this week. It makes a sextile to Uranus and Taurus, a trine to the North Node in Cancer, right, a fellow water sign, and then a sextile to Jupiter in Capricorn. And so while Venus moves through Pisces this week, it's having a lot of nice, pleasant conversations. And so that can really feel soothing. One thing I will say is that, like with everything, there's always sort of a lower vibration, right, to the energy. So just be mindful of not diving too deep into escapism of the unhealthy kind, and to watch the tendency to perhaps see things through starry eyes or rose-colored glasses, right? I think Mercury and the sun moving into Aquarius will mitigate that effect that Venus sometimes has in Pisces, but generally this is really quite nice energy, and it's a good time for doing creative things involving beautifying, any kind of artistic endeavors, spiritual endeavors. It can be quite, romantic and dreamy, that kind of thing. So we've got that going on with Venus, and I'll speak to each sign and where you'll be feeling that energy over the next several weeks. In your own life, what house that'll be in for you. And then the next thing we have, as I mentioned to you, is that Mercury is moving out of Capricorn and moving into Aquarius on the 17th and the 18th. I'm going to pause here for just a second to show you the chart so we can see where all of this is happening and we can have a visual of it. Just have to grab the chart here. So here's the chart drawn up just for today, just before I started recording here. And you can see we still have all of this energy in Capricorn, right? The conjunction just happened. We still have Mercury and the sun there right now, We also have Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, the South Node, all their asteroid series as well, which is not here on this chart. But Mercury and the Sun are going to very soon move out of Capricorn and move into Aquarius. So some of this heavy Capricorn energy we've been feeling will begin to ease up some. And then we will have a bit more focus on Aquarius, including the new moon in Aquarius. But I'll talk about that in next week's video. Here we've got, let's see here. There's Venus, There's Venus, just moved into Pisces. So in the early degrees, right, of Pisces. And again, we'll be making some nice conversations to Uranus and Taurus and Jupiter in Capricorn, and to the North Node down here in Cancer, right? So I think really that's all I want to show you on today's chart. We have Mars and Sagittarius still, and for the next while, right up here, which I haven't talked too much about, but Mars and Sagittarius can be, I have Mars and Sagittarius natally, can be a bit opinionated, frankly. I'll own it, definitely. But really, you know, has this drive to kind of seek the truth and go on a bit of an adventure, depending on where that sits in your own chart. So we can have people really speaking their minds around this time. And again, maybe that's not a bad thing with Venus being in Pisces, right? So we don't end up being a pushover. Okay, so I already spoke to you about Jupiter becoming visible and about Venus. Talked a little about the moon. So now we're going to talk about Mercury moving out of Capricorn and entering the fixed air sign of Aquarius. So just like Venus likes to be in Pisces, Mercury likes to be in Aquarius. And it's quick-minded there, right? Mercury is the planet of our mind, the messenger god, the one who brings the messages and between the worlds. Mercury can travel as well, but ideas, thoughts, intellect, you know, speaking, writing, any kind of communication related things, any kind of travel related things as well, Mercury is connected to. And it's with Mercury and Aquarius, it's like this blending of the energies of the higher mind, which Aquarius would be associated with. Uranus rules Aquarius, right? Planet of the higher mind. And then Uranus is known as the higher octave of Mercury. And Mercury rules the lower mind. Now, higher and lower makes it sound like those are like one's better than the other. And that's not the case. It's just they're kind of two sides of the same coin, right? And so Uranus, Aquarius is more about these higher minded ideals, whereas Mercury is more about sort of the day-to-day exchange of information and messages and thoughts and that sort of thing. And so under this influence, our mind has an increased capacity really to connect the dots, to tap into the collective hive, right? Which is Aquarius. And can be very quick thinking. So there's this rapid kind of connection of ideas that come together in an innovative way, uniquely. And the downfall of Mercury in Aquarius is that our thinking can be a little fixed. It's a fixed air sign, right? So we can get really focused on something and are not quick to change our minds or our viewpoint, even if with new information. And the other thing I'd say is Mercury in Aquarius can be a little emotionally detached. It can have that feeling about it. I have Mercury in Aquarius in my natal chart. And so I connect very much to this notion of like this rapid fire constant barrage of information, and this capacity to see patterns, to recognize patterns and connect the dots, and bring ideas that may seem conflicting sort of together. But it can be quite pragmatic too, and the risk there is being too much so, right? So pragmatism is good, I feel, in many cases, as long as it's not taken too far. So that's Mercury in Aquarius. And then we also have, one thing I wanted to say about that is Mercury is going to square Uranus. So those two planets that I was just speaking about are going to square each other on the 19th. So this can be, right, a square, 90-degree angle, conversation of tension, but a dynamic conversation, right? So this can feel like a bit of a jolt, like a sudden idea or a sudden communication or a message comes in, or perhaps a very dynamic group conversation with this being Aquarius involved, can happen. So it might be something you need to act on, seeing as it is a square. So that's the 19th. And then next Monday on the 20th, the sun will enter Aquarius. So happy birthday to Aquarius sun signs. It's about to be your season. And the sun... So we talked about Venus liking to be in Pisces, Mercury liking to be in Aquarius. The sun doesn't love to be in Aquarius. And that is because the sun is about our individuality, right? Like in the sense that it's how we express ourselves as individuals, how we create as individuals. And Aquarius is more about the group, the collaboration. Sort of humanity as a whole rather than the individual. And that's really interesting. And it seems like a bit of a paradox. And Aquarius is a bit of a paradoxical sign. People sometimes think Aquarius is a water sign because of the symbol, but Aquarius is actually an air sign. It is the water bearer. But Aquarius is associated very much with rebellion and going our own way and being an individual within the larger context of the group, though, right? So it's like that concept that a group is a collection of individuals. So, but the sun is more focused on the individual self-expression. And so it can be a little bit uncomfortable in Aquarius. But with the sun in Aquarius, we're motivated by this need to do things differently, to perhaps rebel a bit, to think outside the box, maybe to get rid of the box altogether. We crave sort of different perspectives and innovation and this desire to think about things in a different way, right? It will feel in many ways very different from the energy of Capricorn that we've been in. And I mean, we still have a lot going on in Capricorn. Don't get me wrong. There's still lots of work to do there. So don't think we're, over and done with the Capricorn stuff, because we're not. But we've moved kind of through the bottleneck of that at this point. But the interesting thing is that in ancient times, before Uranus was, well, not even ancient times, but before Uranus was discovered, Saturn was also assigned to Aquarius. So Saturn rules Capricorn, the sign before it. It was also assigned to Aquarius as its ruler. And now we see Uranus as the ruler of Aquarius, which in many ways makes more sense to me. But the thing is that I see the similarity in Aquarius and Capricorn in a few ways, but most notably, they both have to do with boundaries. Think about the rings around Saturn, right? Boundaries. And so it's like generally Capricorn sets the boundaries and it operates within the boundaries, right? And the rules and the traditions and all of that. Whereas Aquarius likes to push the boundaries and likes to see beyond the boundaries. So, but you see how they have that in common, right? It's that concept of boundaries in some way. So with Mercury and the Sun moving into Aquarius, if we've been feeling a bit restricted, a bit boxed in regarding certain things in certain areas of life, then this is a time when we may look to rebel against that, against those constrictions, to individuate more, to move beyond, any limitations that we may be perceiving in our lives. So the area of life that's going to be concentrated in will be different for each of us, depending on our natal placements, right? And in these general forecasts, as you know, we focus on first and foremost rising sign, because that tends to be the most obvious and accurate when we're looking at a general forecast, because we deal with the house placements based on rising sign. But also the information will resonate with your sun sign and your moon sign too. So if you listen to all three of those, it gives you a bigger picture. If you only know your sun sign, that's okay. It'll give you something at least. And definitely listen to the introduction, because even if you don't listen to any of me going through the signs, the introduction is really always the important part. So we'll talk about Mercury and the Sun into Aquarius and Venus into Pisces, and the areas of each chart that will hit for us. And I'll begin with Pisces, because since Venus is already in Pisces as of earlier this week, I'll start there. So I'll give you Venus in Pisces and then Sun and Mercury into Aquarius for each sign, beginning with Pisces. All right, Pisces. So you've got Venus moving into your sign, right? Into your first house for Pisces rising. And this is really nice energy. It likes being in your sign, Venus. So it can give you this, for Pisces rising folks in particular, this aura of, beauty and mystery and gentleness kind of thing. This ethereal kind of, aura. And whenever something transits the first house, it can be this new beginning in that area of the self, right? The first house is the house of the self, of my physical appearance, my physical, my physical vitality and my instinctual approach to the world, how I come across to the world. That's all first house. And so Venus moving in there can have an impact on those things in a lovely way. And I'm actually Pisces sun sign. Changed my hair last week. It's a little darker. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm still getting used to it. We'll see how it goes. But so you can see, like, it's still, even though that Pisces is my sun sign, it still resonates, right? And then we've got, for you Pisces, Mercury and the Sun moving into your 12th house. So moving into this very private part of your chart is where this sits for you. And this can be where your thoughts, your ideas, your motivations turn to kind of more private things, what goes on behind closed doors. Can be spiritual pursuits, can be things revolving around your more kind of mental, spiritual health. It can have to do with maybe focusing on any self-sabotaging behaviors, right? Can be 12th house. Those habits that can derail us. Sometimes that we're even not conscious of, because that is the 12th house. It can, Mercury, particularly in Aquarius in the 12th, can, we can be receiving some information in our dreams, perhaps. And we may have increased sort of communications and interactions and focus on things that have to do with retreat centers, or like anything, you've heard me say this, any kind of institutions that are sort of tucked away from the world in a way. So hospitals, hospices, retirement, homes, can be detention facilities, rehabilitation facilities, recuperation facilities, anything like this. So that's the 12th house focus for you over the next kind of 3 to 4 weeks, Aquarius. And we're going to Pisces, and we're going to move on to Aquarius now. So Aquarius, you have Venus has just moved into your second house. And so Venus is at home in the second house, and because it is the co-ruler of Taurus, and Taurus lives in the second house. And so for you, Aquarius, this Venusian energy, right? Venus is the planet of love and relationship and beauty and values and what we value. And it can be associated with material values as well, like money, actually money. And so with Venus moving in here, this can bring a nice pleasant energy to this second house, that has to do with your money and your resources and your material possessions and what you value and your sense of self-worth is getting a nice healing balm from Venus moving through this area of the chart for you over the next few weeks. And then we've got Mercury and the Sun entering your first house, right? So this kind of rebirth in the first house of self and your physical body and your physical appearance and your the way you present out into the world and the way you kind of instinctually react to the world. We've got Mercury and the Sun moving in there. And so there may be some increased communications or thoughts or messages going on involving those first house matters. There may be more of a focus, right, with the Sun, that light of the Sun focused on the self for a time, for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And then if you listen to the intro, Aquarius, it will give you those other pieces of the puzzle. But those are the general areas of life that are the focus for you with these particular energies over the next 3 to 4 weeks. So moving on to Capricorn now. Capricorn, Venus is transiting your third house for the next few weeks, right? Bringing that soothing balm to your communications, to your immediate environment of your community, your peers, your siblings, your cousins. The messages exchanged on the day-to-day, and short trips or short distance travel kind of thing is the third house as well. And so, or early learning is also third house, right? Early education. Like what I mean by early learning, it can quite literally be early learning, when it comes to children, but it can be anything sort of that we learn we're learning the basics of. And so some real pleasant energy in that third house for you over the next few weeks, Capricorn. And since you are an earth sign, you are, oh, never mind. Phew, never mind. Just lost it. If it comes back to me, I'll let you know. Told you I was tired. But let's just move on to talk about the fact that Mercury and the Sun are entering your second house later this week. And so we've got a lot of focus, a lot of mental energy and communication and thoughts and ideas and perhaps individual, that energy of the Sun, that individual expression being channeled through your house of resources, right? Money. I also consider our time and energy, our resources as well. And so I focus on those things and your values and what you value and what you feel that you're worth, right? Your self-worth is second house. And so Mercury and the Sun there's a concentration of focus in that way on those second house themes. And then of course, again, Venus in the third. which we spoke about. So I'm going to move on to Sagittarius now, where we have Venus transiting your 4th house for the next few weeks. So for you, Sag, this is bringing some nice healing energy to your foundations, to your roots, to your home, your family, your place of living, your ancestral lineage, in a sense. It has to do with your emotional well-being as well, right? That sense of emotional security. And so Venus moving in here can feel quite like, nice things are happening on the home front. You're feeling a little bit less rattled emotionally, perhaps over the next few weeks, and that has to be a good thing, right, Sag? And so that's what's going on with Venus. And then Mercury and the Sun moving into your 3rd house will bring that increased focus and mental energy to your house of your immediate environment, your peers, your siblings, your cousins, people in your neighborhood, the people that you communicate with on the day-to-day kind of thing. And this also has to do with, short trips and anything involving communication, right, is 3rd house. Anything involving learning the basics is 3rd house. So this 3rd house, all those things is getting some attention from Mercury and the Sun that we, and we spoke about the qualities of that in greater detail in the introduction. So that's what's going on for you over the next 3 to 4 weeks, Sag, in terms of those energies. And we're moving on to Scorpio now, where we've got Venus that has now entered your 5th house for the next few weeks, bringing a lovely, energy, a soothing energy to all things involving your creative self-expression, to your children and children you're associated with, to your what brings you pleasure and how you have fun in life, what sparks joy for you. Venus moving through the 5th house can be quite romantic and just bring some nice pleasure over the next few weeks. And so we've got that, and then we have Mercury and the Sun focusing in on your 4th house, right? Bringing that energy, that mental energy, and that sort of soul energy of the Sun, right, into your 4th house of home, family, place of living, your roots, your ancestry, your emotional security. And so there can be a lot of focus on these things for you over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And combined with that Venus in the 5th house, this you can start to feel, I think, Scorpio, like things are maybe becoming a little less of a slog for you. And, you're kind of getting your bearings, and maybe you're getting to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel a little more readily. So that's for you, Scorpio. Moving on to Libra, we have Venus entering your 6th house. Well, she's there now as of earlier this week. And then Mercury and the Sun in your 5th. So Venus entering the 6th house is bringing some pleasantness to your daily affairs. Some, perhaps more creativity, dreaminess, compassion, empathy, these kinds of things to what you do on the day-to-day, to your daily routine, to your health and wellness routines, to how you are of service. And this can feel very different from what's been transpiring for you, perhaps, Libra, but be mindful not to see through things too much through rose-colored glasses, but welcome this soothing energy into your 6th house. And then Mercury and the Sun are focusing in on your 5th house. So bringing a lot of attention, a lot of mental energy, a lot of communications, a lot of perhaps even passion with the Sun to the house that has to do with your individual self-expression, It can be children or children you're associated with in some way. What sparks joy for you? What brings you pleasure? These kinds of things is getting some focus from Mercury and the Sun over these next few weeks. So, and always listen to the intro for more details. Moving on to Virgo, where we've got the influence of Venus moving through your 7th house of one-to-one relationships over the next few weeks. So Virgo, for you, this can bring some, pleasant energy to your close personal relationships and some, maybe even some romance, some dreaminess, some creativity, some empathy, all of these, these energies to your 7th house, some beauty, some focus on resources with Venus there, but in a pleasant way. And then Virgo, Mercury and the Sun are focusing in on your 6th house, bringing your attention, your thoughts, communications, your soul energy, right? The Sun to the 6th house of the daily grind, your daily affairs, all those tasks you do on the day-to-day, paid or unpaid, how you are of service out in the world to others. So that's where Mercury and the Sun are focusing for you for the next few weeks. Moving on to Leo. Leo, we have Venus entering your 8th house, and that is bringing a soothing balm to these notions of vulnerability and perhaps psychological healing and shared resources. These are all 8th house things, right? So the money you share with others, debts, insurance, taxes, all of those things. Venus is coming there to give you a little bit of pleasantness and relief, perhaps. And then we've got Mercury and the Sun focusing in on your 7th house of one-to-one relationships. So perhaps increased focus there, thoughts, ideas, communications, and passion around your close personal relationships. So that's for you, Leo. Moving on to Cancer. Cancer, you have Venus entering your 9th house of higher learning, of long distance travel, of, even armchair travel, of your philosophies and belief systems. And so Venus is bringing some nice, pleasant energy to that 9th house for you, Cancer. And, maybe you're dreaming about a vacation somewhere. That's possible over these next few weeks. And then Mercury and the Sun are focusing on your 8th house, bringing a lot of attention, mental energy, communications, and focus, like passion, perhaps, to dealing with 8th house matters of vulnerability, of psychological healing, of the resources that you share with others. Perhaps money that you earn from business, through business partnerships, or even inheritance taxes, those kinds of things as well. So that's the focus for you over the next few weeks, Cancer. And then we have Gemini, where we've got Venus focusing in on your 10th house of career and public reputation and status and the legacy you wish to leave. So Gemini, for you, Venus is bringing some pleasant energy here and a soothing balm, as I spoke of in the outset of the video, in the intro, to this 10th house area over the next few weeks. And then we have Mercury and the Sun for you focusing in on your 9th house of long distance travel, of higher learning, of teaching, learning, publication. It can have to do with your hope or your how you perceive the world, right? Your belief system, that kind of thing. And so for you, that is where this mental energy, these communications, right? That's the Mercury piece, are being focused, and some passion is being focused there as well with the Sun in that 9th house, Gemini. And then we have Taurus. Taurus, you've got Venus moving through your 11th house of groups and friendships and organizations and clubs and associations and your hopes and dreams for the future. So this can be some real pleasant energy for you over the next few weeks in those 11th house matters, Taurus, bringing you some, perhaps even new relationship that in a group setting kind of thing with Venus there. And then we have Mercury and the Sun focusing on your 10th house of career, of public reputation, of your worldly ambitions, the legacy you wish to leave. And that is a lot of mental focus there and communications there, and a lot of passion being injected into that 10th house of the chart over the next few weeks. And then last but not least, we have Aries, where we have Venus entering your 12th house, which will be more internal focus for you. Maybe a little more focus on, loving what goes on behind closed doors, or how you spend time in solitude, bringing more pleasant energy to that, and to really maybe pleasant dreams, maybe some positive energy dealing with any self-sabotaging behaviors. And then you've got Mercury and the Sun focused strongly on your 11th house of friendship groups, clubs, associations, the people who walk the same path as you, your hopes and dreams for the future. And so there's a lot of mental energy and a lot of passion being focused on that 11th house for you, Aries. All right, that's all 12 signs. I hope you listened to the introduction for all the details, and I hope that didn't sound too rushed. But I will see you next week, where we will talk about the new moon in Aquarius. Okay, take good care. Bye-bye.